All right. So we begin our second part of our conversation about the meaning of Christmas. For those of you who didn't catch our first part of our conversation, we began our discussion on uh, talking about what the meaning of Christmas is from a philosophical perspective. And we went over some of the key issues uh, when it comes to understanding the philosophical meaning of Christmas. And we touched upon how Christmas uh, is a time of the season where, um, you know, our ethical selves are become, more active. The Christmas holidays seem to uh, bring out our virtues, and they seem to bring out our benevolent qualities. Um, so, to that degree, I think Christmas has a role with regards to our well-being. On the one hand, I think Christmas is a time in which we can strive to further cultivate our eudaimonic well-being, uh, you know, our sense of um, realizing our potential as a human being, in this case, as an ethical being. But it's also an opportunity to cultivate our hedonic well-being, our experience of pleasure, and it's not just about us. It's not just about how we can enhance our well-being in the broad sense, but it's also about how can we enhance other people's well-being. And so we looked at the Christmas Carol and how the Christmas Carol, in my opinion, I think serves as a good archetypal story of the meaning of Christmas and of those themes that I just mentioned of uh, human well-being and the promotion of well-being both for ourselves and for others in this reciprocal way. And and where we left off was a discussion about the supernatural, and of course, the supernatural plays a role in Dickens' A Christmas Carol. And if we interpret the events of that novella as implicating the supernatural, that's something up for discussion, I suppose. But in the Christmas Carol, of course, Scrooge is visited by four spirits, I suppose, if we count Jacob Marley as a spirit. And each of these plays some key role in Scrooge's transformation from a selfish miser to a more benevolent, compassionate human being. And I guess it was up for some debate as to whether or not we think there are supernatural entities influencing his conduct, or more generally, whether there are supernatural entities influencing our conduct. Um, so, so I thought where we could begin is taking the alternative perspective and looking at maybe interpreting Scrooge's transformation not so much as a transformation that is catalyzed by the supernatural, but a transformation that's catalyzed by natural influences. And so I guess I'll briefly just go over what that means as far as the novella goes, and as far as um, understanding goes more generally. Um, so the question I wanted to ask is, to what extent do natural forces shape our ethical character during Christmas? And this gives us an opportunity to reflect on the role that uh, certain natural phenomena, let's say certain uh, processes within our own consciousness can affect change. So we're not locating the locus of change in the supernatural, but we're locating it in the natural. And in this case, we're viewing consciousness itself as a natural phenomenon, um, and as something that has some um, ability to influence our behavior. And in the case of the Christmas Carol, um, Scrooge's memories seem to play a role in that regard. Not only his memories, but other processes within consciousness. And I just want to briefly touch upon some of those. So the first of these is the role that memory plays. So with Scrooge, it plays a key role. And by memory, I just mean the faculty by which the mind stores and remembers information. And so in this case, Scrooge has memories of the past. And so we're going to talk about those a little bit as we go along. Another one of these natural factors is mindfulness. So mindfulness is just the quality or a state of being conscious or aware of something. And it's a mental state achieved by focusing your attention on the awareness of the present moment and calmly acknowledging and accepting your feelings and your thoughts and your bodily sensations. That's how it's kind of understood as a therapeutic technique. And it also relates to the awareness of the present. And we'll talk about how that applies to the novella. Then another natural factor is imagination. And that's just the faculty or action of forming new ideas or images or concepts of external objects that are not present to the senses. And so in the case of the novella, Scrooge experiences a possible future. And so we might argue that that is a part of his imagination. And then another process I thought of, and this is maybe not a typical one, but I am interested in the nature of wisdom. And I have studied a bit of the literature on the nature of wisdom. And wisdom researchers, in understanding wisdom, one particular theoretical construct which has been proposed and which has been shown to have a strong correlation with the growth of wisdom is it's called reflectivity. I guess that's just a fancy technical word to describe a faculty which is a precursor for wisdom and as well as a central component of it. And basically reflectivity is a person's motivation to think about complex life challenges in complex ways. And it's not possible to integrate what any person learns in their wide-ranging and sometimes challenging life experiences without it. And the wise person is someone who exhibits this quality of reflectivity. And what this means is they're capable of looking back on the breadth of their experience with a depth of thought. And they have a tendency to think critically about their own past and their current beliefs and their behavior with the primary goal of developing a deeper understanding of oneself and rather than abiding in this false reassurance that one knows everything. And it's to put it differently, it's a way of extracting lessons from the insights one gains from experience. And it's a willingness to change one's beliefs and behaviors and characters when the process of reflection, admonishes them to do so. And so I'd like to apply this particular concept to understanding the novella because I think it's one that we can use to make sense of Scrooge's transformation from a naturalistic perspective. And so that's sort of the proposal here is let's examine this from this naturalistic stance, looking at these different faculties. Do you think that's a good starting point? Are you on board with that, Ryan? What do you think of these concepts? Do you think? Because I know you had some doubts about the supernatural in our last conversation, and do you think these proposed cognitive faculties are better alternatives, or can you think of some others, perhaps?
I think from an ontological perspective, they're more realistic. Like they're easier to believe in for me. But now thinking it from like a pragmatic perspective, now that we've kind of got to this point. I think if you're someone who is open to the idea of supernatural forces, it might actually have more of an impact on you than just saying like, oh, I had a memory of something, or oh, I was just being mindful. Like if you genuinely believe you were confronted with spirits or something, that might have more of an impact on your psyche and your behavior. So that's just something that I just sort of came to me while we were talking about this.
Right.
But now, in terms of these four concepts that you've sort of put forward, the one I'm least familiar with is reflectivity, which is probably not a surprise. So I'm interested to dig deeper into that one and how that relates to the novella and just, to our idea of ethical behavior during Christmas. So if you could help guide me through that a little bit more, that would be awesome.
Okay, sure. Well, I'm glad that that sounds like a good proposal. I think was an interesting point you made about the pragmatic value of believing in the supernatural, though. I think that could very well be the case. When we think of our lives being, not just all up to chance and coincidence, but also guided by some kind of providence, I think that's very definitely motivational in many regards and inspirational too. And I suppose that would open up a whole other can of worms, which we could spend quite a long conversation about. Maybe we can revisit that over the course of this current conversation if it comes up in the right context. I think maybe we can just dive into analyzing the novella from this naturalistic perspective.
One general point, I think it just really comes down to a matter of how open-minded you are. If you're an open-minded person, then you're probably going to be more likely to believe in the supernatural, and you're probably going to be more likely to change your behavior because you're an open-minded person.
Right.
If you have less openness, you're probably not going to believe in those things. You're probably going to be more stubborn. I think that's just like a quick way of summing that up.
Right. Well, yeah, no, it's a good observation. I mean, I think openness is the right word to use there. I think it definitely is the tendency to believe in the supernatural. Definitely would seem to be a quality of which an open person would subscribe to, or not a quality, but a belief an open person would subscribe to. The personality researchers, talk about openness to experience as being one of the basic personality traits.
Yes, yeah.
Within the Big Five model, right? There's conscientiousness and agreeableness, and neuroticism, and extroversion, and openness to experience, and that openness to experience always, it always speaks to the tendency to, I guess, a willingness to entertain certain maybe unconventional beliefs, or it's a tendency to not be too rigid also in your beliefs, to be open to the possibilities of there being things like the supernatural. So yeah, I think definitely that speaks to personality, and so maybe this discussion we're having tonight will reflect our respective personalities as to what we think is true regarding the supernatural and the natural. But getting back to the literary example here and Scrooge's transformation, his transformation begins when he's forced to contemplate the scenes from his past life, and he's presented with visions of the present and possible future. And I think this addresses this issue of the impact that both pleasant and painful memories have upon transformations in ethical character. And in this case, the painful memories almost seem to have a more salutary effect on Scrooge's moral life than the pleasant ones do, which I think is interesting. And similarly, visions of a possible future may be distressing and prompt some change in heart and mind as well. So that's more of a forward-looking, looking forward can also, induce changes in character as well. Like getting back to memory, we have certain pleasant memories in the Carol, and one of these that Scrooge revisits when he's taken to the back into the past by the ghost of Christmas past is a memory he had at his employer, Fezziwig's warehouse. And Fezziwig was who Scrooge apprenticed under when he was a younger man. And Fezziwig had a yearly tradition of throwing this party in his warehouse. And so Scrooge is taken back to his former self, his younger self, his youthful self. And he vicariously re-experiences all the pleasure and the joy of that moment. He re-experiences the joy of listening to the music and watching the people dance, and the drink and the food and the company of friends, and the cake and the roast and the mince pies and the abundance of beer and the music of the fiddler, and the ensuing dance to the music, and all these good memories. And the older Scrooge, when revisiting this past scene, under the guidance of the Ghost of Christmas Past, he remembers everything, and he re-experiences that joy, as I just mentioned, and he undergoes an important change in consciousness as a result. And he realizes that a friendly employer, such as Fezziwig, whom he apprenticed under, has the power to make one happy or unhappy, to make one's work-related tasks pleasurable or burdensome. So I think this is a very interesting psychological observation of Dickens here that he's portrayed in literary form. But I think it's true. It resonates with my experience. I think we all have the potential in us to, to act in accordance with goodness or malevolence, and it's this age-old conflict between good and evil, and that we always encounter as human beings. And the potential to be either good or evil exists within us, and it's, I think, to some degree, hopefully it's a matter of choice. Hopefully it's not fated by genetics or other things that are beyond our control. I would hope that it's within our control, insofar as we're free and autonomous agents to choose the side of good, like Fezziwig seems to have done. And just to wrap up this thought, and then we can get into some conversation here. Scrooge concedes that the power of a person to affect one's well-being in this manner, for good or for ill, lies in the person's words and looks. And that's a phrase taken from the novella, words and looks, and things that are very simple, subtle, and seemingly insignificant, and importantly, in things that cannot be purchased merely by money. So I thought that definitely struck a chord with me. I feel like often when I'm, if I've been in a melancholy state, or if I've been down, if I've been blue, often being around people, who give off this aura. So there's something about them that's very subtle that seems to affect the quality of my own being, and that person, they themselves could be in a more joyful state, in a more elevated state, and that kind of elevates me to their level. And often it's not even what they say, but it's just their being itself, and what their being radiates. And it's in their looks, it's in their gestures, it's in their all of those things, and just tiny little subtle things. And I think can have pretty wide-ranging and impactful effects. So what do you think of that analysis of memory taking you back to the good old times and bringing you to these new realizations, and then in turn, leading to this more positive change in character? What do you think of that?
In terms of memory, I think having good memories, certainly, like when I look back at my time at Christmas as a kid, always so positive, makes me think of my grandfather. And it also encourages me to embody him and his sort of good nature that I remember him having. And I think it's like that with my whole family. He was sort of the one that embodied Christmas in my family. He was the one that spoiled everyone. He was always that character. So I remember the first few Christmases after he passed as a little kid, it was hard for everybody. But now that I'm older, not just at Christmas, but I look for opportunities to embody him, because I also know how that affects like my grandma. You know, my grandpa's widowed wife, right?
Right.
Like, and my mom, that's her dad. If I can embody that, like, it not only makes me happy, but it has an impact on everyone around me. And it just like tapping into those happy memories really, I think, does play a role in that. Now, as far as the painful memories go, I think that certainly, can play a role in changing us. I think we've discussed sort of this in our podcasts or our recordings on happiness.
Right.
Just like we got to have some negative experiences to really set us towards what we really want.
Mm-hmm.
I won't say too much about this, but I think maybe the sort of negative aspect might be more important when considering imagination in our future. Like when being confronted with that, like we can't change our past, but if we're being confronted with something about our future and sort of the way it's going to go if we don't change, I think that will scare the bejeebus out of us more than looking at something negative in our past. But that's as much as I'll say about that.
Right. Well, I think that's a good foreshadowing of the next topic we're going to hit on in just a little while. But it's good just to anticipate that. And I that definitely does make sense to me. I think your point about embodying the memory of your belated grandfather, I think it was a pretty insightful point. I think it feels like my own ancestors are in me to some degree, insofar as they live on in my memory. And now they're just a lot like all of my grandparents now have been deceased for, I don't know, at least my last was maybe 20 years ago or so.
Wow.
So it's been a while, and so the memories have faded a bit, and so, but I'm sure I'm acting out their, the positive qualities that they imprinted on me. And I think Christmas in my family was always a big deal. It was especially a big deal for my dad. He'd always go all in on it, and my mom too played a big role in that. But they always kind of created this magical experience for us, and when we were young, and it wasn't just the gift giving, but it was just the whole atmosphere of expectation and giving and the joy that came out of that. And it's a tradition I would like to continue, but I think that I wouldn't have that attitude unless it was for my past and in my recollection of that past, and so I think when I look back, well, let me put it this way. Let me put this in the context of the novella. So getting back to Scrooge, I think like Fezziwig, it's we all have the capacity to do good or evil, and so I think that I definitely resonate with that. I think that it's maybe partly a matter of choice. It's partly a matter of awareness, And so, you know, Fezziwig, he was kind and generous with his employers, so we can be that way, or we can be cruel and stingy with our employers, like the old Scrooge was. And you know, I could treat my family and friends in a like manner, and so I guess, what does this depend on? Does this depend on acting in congruence with our ethical conscience, opening our hearts and minds to the Christmas spirit, allowing its benevolent influence to act through us, through, you know, cultivating and applying, or is it more of just a matter of, you know, cultivating and applying virtue? I suppose that, you know, this quality of reflectivity we were talking about earlier could come into play. This ability to reflect on your past experience and to extract the lessons from it so that you can change and modify your behavior for the better, I think plays a big role. So, you know, I think that's one way we can make sense of Scrooge's transformation. And maybe just more generally of other people's experiences during the holidays. So that kind of touches on this issue of positive memories, but also there's painful memories that are depicted in the Christmas Carol. And one of these is Scrooge breaking up with his fiancée, Belle. And so the younger Scrooge was someone who was loved by his fiancée. But then, you know, as he develops, as their relationship develops, he comes to love money more than her. And so Scrooge, he grows selfish, and he comes to love money more than his fiancée. And the spirit of Christmas Past exposes Scrooge to the breakup scene between his youthful self and his fiancée. And at this stage, his love for her is now deficient in comparison for his love for money, which is now excessive. And the older Scrooge, upon being exposed to these past scenes and experiences, he feels great pain as a result. And he declares to the spirit that he doesn't want to see these images anymore because it's torture for him to see. And so I suppose the question I had here was, how could painful experiences prompt a beneficial change in Scrooge? We're in a similar archetype or person, and can re-experiencing something as profound as the loss of one's fiancé or beloved make us a more loving person? And so I'm curious what you think there. You know, we talked about the beneficial effect of the positive memories in the previous case. In this case, it's we're kind of seeing if there is a positive effect of painful memories. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, haven't necessarily lost a fiance, but I am divorced, and it was a particularly painful experience to go through. And yeah, I think coming to terms with that, not shying away with it, you know, and really facing that head on, it provides a great opportunity for growth. You know, I know going through the experience, a lot of people, friends, family, it was almost like they encourage you to look away from it and like look towards like what the other person did wrong. But I think like facing it head on and like looking at the sort of painful side, which is your role in the situation, like that's what provides you with that room for growth. Right. And it's going to make you a better person, like in your next relationship, and also just like a better person to yourself. You know, just it's gonna make you a little more mindful, make you a little more aware of what you were doing and how you can change moving forward and just be a better person all around. So I think those painful experiences are really, really important.
Right.
Makes you think about how your actions affect other people and how they might impact yourself too, in ways that you weren't even expecting.
Right. Yeah, that's a good example. I mean, I haven't been married myself or gone through that process myself, but I've also experienced painful losses, and whether it was with a beloved one, romantically, or just the loss of a friend. I think pain is something I want to avoid. I don't like feeling of being in pain. It's an aversive experience. Whenever I'm in a painful state, I'm motivated to get out of that state, to get into a pleasant state or a neutral state, and
to not go back there.
Not go back there. Yeah, to not go back there. And so it definitely does seem that the experience of pain, just like sticking my hand in a fire, causes me to want to, get out of that state of affairs, to move my fan out of the fire, or to make myself happier, get into a better, more positive mood. And rather than, wallowing in my grief and my depressed mood, I want to, get up and go for a walk, meet up with a friend and think about something else, distract myself. And so I guess in this case with Scrooge, he's tortured by these images that he's seeing. And I can only, just think that he might be thinking the same thoughts to himself. How do I get out of this? How do I stop this, experience of pain? And, maybe that signals to him that maybe going forward, he wants to build healthier relationships, more sustainable relationships, ones which are based on reciprocal love, not just a love of money, but maybe a stronger love for the person you're with. And
symbiotic instead of parasitic.
Exactly. Right. So maybe a re-experience of the past like that can jolt awareness and shift attention and focus to that, precisely that, building healthier relationships based on reciprocity and based on social emotions like love and sense of togetherness and these kinds of things. Now, moving along, I wanted to look now at the impact that mindfulness has on this change of character. And in the context of looking at the part of the novella where Scrooge is confronted with the ghost of Christmas present. And Dickens, at this part of the novella, Dickens kind of presents us with an image of two children and their personifications of ignorance and want. So Scrooge is with the ghost of Christmas present, and these two little children are hiding underneath the gown of the ghost, and Scrooge can kind of see their feet kind of poking through underneath the cloak. And surely enough, these two little children come crawling out, and Scrooge observes the two children, and basically they're described the following way as wretched, abject, frightful, hideous, and miserable, and as yellow, meager, ragged, scowling, wolfish, and as prostrate too in their humility. That's the quote from the novella there. So these children are essential to the story's Christian message and its effectiveness as a piece of literature. And it's not merely a Christian message, I would argue, but it's also a more generally ethical message. And ignorance, the boy, and want, the girl, I think in some sense represents and an impoverishment of the body and mind. And each of these poses a danger to society. And each, moreover, are essential to evoking feelings of fear and an urgent need for Scrooge to fundamentally change himself in heart and mind. So when Scrooge is exposed to these impoverished children, he asks the ghost of Christmas present, he asks them, have they no refuge or resource? And then the ghost of Christmas present echoes Scrooge's own words back to him and says, and these are words that Scrooge says earlier on in the novella, before he's undergone this transformation. And he says, are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses? And so what comes next is we see an ebullient transformation in Scrooge, or we might see it in a similar archetype. When we see Scrooge's genuine concern for these two children, I think we respond with kind of a joy and a relief along with that. And so I think the Christmas Carol is not merely a story about a skinflint employer, Scrooge, and his clerk, Cratchit, but it's a story that represents, through its archetypes, such as Scrooge, all the selfishness and indifference of the prosperous classes who are continually complaining about the surplus population, and who believe that their social responsibilities have been fully met when they have paid their taxes. So, in other words, that would be that would describe Scrooge quite accurately, I think, earlier on in the novella. And so, so that's the present. That's the impact that the present mindfulness has on Scrooge's character. He's becoming mindful of the reality, I suppose, of child poverty and all of the deprivation that goes along with that. And I guess it was an issue in Dickens' time, living in Victorian England. And
definitely.
I think it's still an issue in our time. And I think there's a tendency among many people to feel distanced from that, not encountering that reality on a regular basis, believing that everyone is well off. If you're well off, I'm fairly well off. I'm not wealthy or rich or anything, but I feel like most of my needs are met, my basic needs and my relationship needs, but some people's needs aren't met, even just their basic needs, to have food and shelter, a place to sleep, and so this, the image of the two children evokes this pity in Scrooge, and I think it partly does so through this mindfulness, through this encountering of the present moment and becoming fully aware of the situation that Scrooge finds himself in. The context of his own life at that point, of him thinking about the repercussions of his own behavior, of his own selfishness, the impact that behavior has on society at large in creating impoverishment. Maybe it is the greedy, covetous, affluent people who are well off, but they're callous and inconsiderate of the people who are needy. Maybe they play a big role in contributing to impoverishment of children or people in similar situations. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on what you think of this part of the novella and the extent to which mindfulness of present plays a role in affecting change.
I think for most people, and even myself, like, being mindful of the present is kind of a hard thing to do. Things are kind of hard to, I think, define and get a real hold of until it's almost like they're done. Like we were talking about before, like, when someone passes away, it's more easy to get a perspective on the situation. So I think maybe being mindful is actually sort of a difficult thing to do that people need to train themselves to do almost. but I think it can have a very powerful experience on people. You see this a lot. When people get maybe acquainted with the, corruptions of government or whatever, you see people start to realize, that you grew up thinking that you're sort of in this perfect little world where everything's been done, everything's taken care of. But as you get older, you become more mindful of the way the system works and sort of the shortcomings of it. And hopefully, that doesn't make you a bitter person, but it motivates you to do something about it. Now, I actually had a question for you in terms of the ghost's response to Scrooge. Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses? What do you think that means to Scrooge, and how do you think that impacts him exactly?
Right. Well, I mean, Scrooge, I think in the context of the novella, are there no prisons? Well, I guess that's implying that in Victorian England, there might be a place for the homeless, albeit an uninviting one. But the homeless could be corralled into a prison, I suppose. That might be a place for them to find some respite from, being out on the streets in the frigid cold. Now, the workhouses, that's something I might have to Google because I didn't quite grasp the reference there. I don't know if we could Google that.
I think this is probably referring to the age of industrialization. And what it's referring to is like these big workhouses where people would come to in order, I think it was like, it resembled like a form of like slavery almost. Like you basically had no choice to go to these big workhouses, these big sort of factories in order to make ends meet. Yeah. And the conditions were terrible, like terrible, terrible, terrible. That's my understanding. It's my interpretation. I'm not entirely sure if that's the case, but I would imagine that's probably what that's referring to.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think you're probably fairly accurate in that assessment. And I know that was a concern for Dickens as a writer. Yeah. These inhumane conditions that people would have to work in Victorian England, like these big workhouses. And of course, this is coinciding with the Industrial Revolution, right? So, mass production and people working on these mass production lines. And I'm sure that their basic rights as human beings being violated in many ways. And I know that children were often recruited at a very early age to work in these inhumane conditions. And so these children here, ignorance and want, might be a good portrayal of just, how these horrific conditions affected children.
Yeah, here's a little description of a workhouse. It's considered a total institution where those unable to support themselves financially were offered accommodation and employment. So it's basically like something akin to volunteer slavery, right, where you're choosing to go and you don't really have any other options. You're probably from a rural area and you've been forced to come to the city in order to find work, because it's no longer viable to work from your farm anymore.
Right.
And it's time to get in the city, and this is your only option. Now, from a modern point of view, I mean, I'm faced with this sort of child impoverishment quite frequently. I'm someone who works in group homes, and it's something that I struggle with, and I'm curious how this is going to affect me later on. Like looking back at the system that I'm in, how much better am I going to see this as, a residential school or as, a modern day workhouse or something like that. And I try to be mindful of these things in the moment. Like, I might think that these kids are lucky. It's like, look, you have all this support, all this funding, look at the way that it used to be. But okay, that's one thing, but I really have to be mindful of still, how does it impact these kids and how does it feel to the kids now? They didn't live in, 50, 100 years ago. They live now. They live here. And how does this system impact them? How does living like this affect them? Even if it looks good to me,
right,
or better than nothing. I mean, I really struggle with this on a regular basis.
Right, right. That's a good personal example. I mean, I think that's a good way of putting this conversation into a more modern context, because it does seem like the same problems are still at play in our modern society, unfortunately. And maybe they might be due to similar factors, due to people who are wealthy and affluent, who have a power of influence over others, who nonetheless, are covetous. They hoard their wealth, keeping it to themselves, and when they could lend it to those in need. And maybe the result is more poverty, more impoverishment, and all of the struggles that go along with that. I think being mindful of that reality, having that fact open to your awareness, being able to look at that, honestly, and to tell it like it is without distorting it at all in your own consciousness, I think is a step forward, at least. I think also what's needed is action, of course, not just mindfulness, but the decisive factor of acting on your awareness.
But I can't just think about it. Doesn't make me a good person just to think about these things. Come on, man.
Right. Well, we're not just armchair philosophers here, right? We're not just sipping our spirits and thinking about these merely abstractly and intellectually.
I purposely got rid of my arms on my chair, so
Right.
I don't have any arms on my chair, just so you know.
Oh, okay.
Well, yeah. I'm just a chair philosopher.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
No arms on your chair. You're just a chair philosopher. I gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, but nonetheless, we kind of know what we're talking about here. It's a style of doing philosophy, which is often very heady, very theoretical, very distanced from the everyday pragmatic realities. And my own approach to philosophy is one which is both theoretical, but it's also very practical. And I think wisdom is the integration of those two things. And and I think that in the context of our discussion right now, with this question of child poverty and deprivation and not having your needs met as a young child, that's a reality that still exists. And I think developing a sensitivity to that is important. Having strong ethical feelings about that, and a compassion that goes with that, which is both the feeling component, but it's also an action component. Because when you have compassion towards somebody, you want to reach out and do something. And I think that just simply being mindful of that reality and having that reality present to your awareness and seeing that reality as it is, without a need to distort that reality, to pretend it's not there, but just to confront that reality mindfully, I think can be a stepping stone, at least, to taking that decisive ethical action. And in Scrooge's own case, I mean, it evokes pity in him. I think pity might be a necessary emotion to experience in order to take that action. And seeing it with his own eyes, or at least in this simulated experience, if it's just a dream, either way, it has this profound impact on him. And so I think it's when you're exposed to that reality that it really impacts you, rather than just thinking about it, smoking a cigar and,
Yeah. I
So
guess it's one thing to be aware of it, but really to witness it or to be a part of it, it's a whole different story, right?
yeah, and to become aware too that you played a role in creating that reality, as you know, Scrooge becomes aware, right? And maybe to some degree we all play a role in creating the reality we inhabit. I mean, insofar as we are um, spectators rather than actors, simply allowing, um, passively sitting on the sidelines and allowing, you know, um, certain individuals to create these horrific conditions. That's partly our responsibility. We partly play a role in that to the extent that we do that. So
I think that's like where I think a lot of critical theory actually comes into place. Like, advocating for people to actually make a difference, like instead of just sitting there and watching. I think that's, to an extent, it does have a good point there. Like, it's one thing to be aware of it, that's fine, but you also have to actively try to make a difference in a certain way. You know, I think that's sort of part of what that sort of theory is trying to get at. I'm not a master in it by any sense. I don't like play a lot around in politics or theories of race for for that instance. But yeah, this is just like a common theme I tend to hear about being sort of, an ally versus someone who just sits there and, observes.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's a time to observe and there's a time to act, and I think to conduct your life as a philosopher involves both, and knowing when to be more contemplative and when to be more active. Um, I think just acting for the sake of acting because someone says it's something you should do is not necessarily the way to go about it. I think,
Yeah.
again, getting back to this quality or this virtue of reflectivity, I think engaging in any course of action, you should be at least a little bit reflective about it, about why you're acting, your motivations for acting, how this is going to impact other people, for good or bad. And I think that's a part of it. But I think going kind of beyond the critical theory, because I'm not an expert on it either, and I don't want to make any assertions or claims about critical theory that are not accurate, but they may be more on a general metaphysical level. Even I think that every human being or everything in the cosmos is like a little individual cell, and so we're all like individual cells in this great body, and the great body is the cosmos. So we're all kind of like entangled, as it were, right? Where um, things can impact other things at a distance, in a seemingly magical way, but quantum physics is saying that's possible. And you know, and Dostoevsky, I think, really got at that well in his well, in his own thinking. Insofar as we can call him a philosopher, he's often thought of as an existentialist philosopher or literary writer who wrote about existential themes, at least. And but he talks about how everybody's responsible for everybody else. So it's a fairly radical claim, but I think it's true to the extent that everything is entangled in this very intricate web. And so, the butterfly flapping its wings down in South America can cause a hurricane. Maybe causality can work that way. And so maybe people's shifting their consciousness, the shift of consciousness towards more of a benevolent consciousness, a more compassionate consciousness, can kind of create an overall shift, a paradigm shift, a change in the zeitgeist. And so it can have a cascading effect, in other words. to create a positive and lasting change in people's psyches, maybe affected through the collective unconscious or something like that. I don't know.
I think one of the ways I view sort of moral or ethical behavior is like when I do something, I basically see every action as a moral or ethical decision. Whenever I act or behave, what I am saying, it's a way of communication as well. What I am saying to the world is anybody and everybody who is in my position here and now ought to behave this way, ought to act in this manner. Right. And I think that's in a way like how you can view like being responsible for other people. It's like I'm acting in a way that I think anybody in my situation or everybody in my situation ought to act. And I'm taking responsibility for that. I'm doing that job for people, for myself. It's sort of like a universalization of morality in a sense, but it keeps its particularity because it's like anybody in my situation here and now ought to behave like this,
right?
And it's a moral claim, right? It's this is the way you should do this. So yeah, I think that's a good point by Dostoevsky, is that you're in some sense responsible for everybody else, and for yourself, right?
Yeah, no, that's a good insight. I think it also reminded me a lot of Kant and his categorical imperative. And, always strive to act in a way that could be universalized. Are the actions that you're currently performing, could these be applied universally? Like, could everyone do the actions you're doing right now? So if you're stealing, you're stealing, I don't know, someone's wallet or something. Well, could that be universalized? If everyone were to steal someone's wallet, could we have a society based on trust and based on based on mutual respect? And it seems like the Kantian answer would be no, because it would just interfere with civil life as we know it, which is based upon mutual respect and trust and things like that. So to the degree we can embody that categorical imperative, I guess, in our own example, as a role model, as an ambassador toward that universal maxim, whatever that is, to that degree, I think we can, play a positive role in creating the world that we want to live in. The ideal state of affairs.
Don't tell anyone I'm close to a Kantian, and when it comes to morality, I don't want anyone knowing that. I don't even like admitting it. I view myself more as a pragmatist. I don't try to adhere to like any laws or principles.
Right.
I just think of like in this situation, how should it? But it is very very Kantian. I might not go and appeal to any universal principle or something, but I'm sure there's some operating in the background there, right? And I mean, one that maybe I would admit to is something like, in order, to get along, you have to genuinely care about what other people want. If you're someone who wants to get what you want, to be, selfish, like you actually have to care from time to time what people want, and you have to do so genuinely.
Right.
You can't be selfish just stealing people's wallets.
Right.
It's just not going to work. You're not going to get what you want at the end of the day. You're not going to be fully satisfied.
Right.
So I do have some universal principles lurking in the background.
Right. Well, it just what you were saying reminded me of Kant in that way.
Yeah.
That universal aspect, at least. I mean, I guess we can want to. We can have a concern for that not be necessarily Kantian, but to any extent, I think that we are responsible, maybe in a qualified way towards everyone else. But we'll just bracket that for the moment. I'd like to return to the impact of the imagined future upon the transformation in ethical character. Again, using our literary example of Scrooge, and so Scrooge is made to see a vision of a possible future, and in this possible future, we see Bob Cratchit admonishing his children after the untimely death of Tiny Tim, and he says, "I know, my dears, that when we recollect how patient and how mild he was, although he was a little child, we shall not quarrel easily among ourselves and forget poor Tiny Tim in doing it." And having been shown such images of his possible future, Scrooge achieves a spiritual apotheosis, which is just, he reaches the highest point of his development. And I think this is kind of the culmination or climax in that sense of the novella. And seeing that image, I mean, again, this, I think, evokes pity within him. He sees that Cratchit has lost his beloved Tiny Tim. And, I know if I were in his shoes, I would definitely be feeling pity and sadness and grief, and maybe regret at not having intervened myself if I had the financial means to help Bob Cratchit and his family and help Tiny Tim deal with his ailments. Maybe his death might have been prevented. So in any case, after seeing this image, Scrooge comes to this realization, and he says, "I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. Oh, tell me I may sponge away the writing on this stone." And so my comments here are that the writing on the stone is referring to, has multiple meanings here. So most obviously, it's the gravestone with Scrooge's name etched on it as the ghost reveals it. The ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, that is.
Yeah.
And after having been shown visions of the past and the present and the future by the three spirits, Scrooge departs from his current life course of being a selfish man to become a more compassionate man. And I think here the virtue of reflectivity plays an instrumental role in Scrooge's transformation. And I think so. So he's visited the future in his imagination. He's been presented with this possible future in which he witnesses the death of Tiny Tim. Well, he doesn't actually see Tiny Tim die, but he infers his death based on Bob Cratchit lamenting his loss. Also, in this last part of the novella, Scrooge also encounters a lot of people who are glad to see him dead. People who were in debt to him, are now off the hook because they don't owe him nearly much back since he is dead. Mm-hmm. And so, all of these emotions that are stirred up within Scrooge as a result of these experiences makes him come to this realization that he's going to honor the Christmas spirit. And again, I think reflectivity comes into this too, because at this stage too, he's reflecting back upon all of these experiences he's had, and he's realizing that his past self, his past conduct really wasn't something he now admires, that he can now identify with or endorse. If anything, I think he might be disgusted with his previous self. He might realize the foolishness of persisting in that course. He's going to maintain that lifestyle of who he was as a selfish person. And he's realizing that maybe the wiser decision is to recognize that he's not fated to be the same person, that he has some degree of choice, that he has some degree of control over the person he wants to become. And he has been he's been put in this position where he feels he needs to change, and embody the virtues that he's been exposed to. Fezziwig and his generosity. And so as a result of all of this, of all this reflection, I think Scrooge becomes who he's capable of becoming in. To that degree, I think he's achieving eudaimonia in some sense, in the sense that he's actualizing his potential as a human being. He's actualizing his virtues, benevolence in this case, maybe, or compassion. And so I think that kind of really touches upon the eudaimonic aspect of the novella, and more generally, how the holidays can provide us with an opportunity to further cultivate our eudaimonia, our self-actualization, perhaps going through similar processes, through reflecting, through revisiting our pasts, through being mindful of the present, and also anticipating the future. But also, well, maybe I'll just leave it at that. Do you have any thoughts on that? Did you do you think that that kind of is what the culmination of the story is about? And do you feel like that is what the holidays to some degree are about eudaimonia in that sense, and bringing that reality about through all of those cognitive processes, those through memory, through mindfulness, through imagination?
Yeah, I think it is. Like, Christmas gives you a reference point and a time to just sort of like look at your past, look at the past year, at the past several years. It gives you a moment where you're not having to work, where you can be mindful, you can be present of the moment. And it also gives you time to imagine and plan for how you want to be in the future. Like, almost like a New Year's resolution. Like, it gives you time to act in a way. Like when we have Christmas, like it's almost as if for like a day or a week, we're all like our best selves. We're all behaving in a way that is kind towards other people, that reflects the best aspects of us as human beings. And I think the point of that is to further us in that direction, like to imagine a world where we can be like that more or all the time.
Right.
I think that's sort of what Christmas is about and what it could do for us. And this is what the novel is about.
Right. Yeah. I think the Reformed Scrooge would probably agree. And I think I would maybe agree to that degree too. I think this Christmas is not necessarily just a specific time of the year. I think it's maybe a philosophy we can take with us throughout the year. Insofar as that involves being kinder towards others, more benevolent to others, seeking to develop the better qualities within ourselves. I think we can keep the Christmas trees to December and the eggnog and all that stuff, but let's retain the ethical philosophy and the ethical principles of Christmas, and let's apply them to our daily lives.
Someone has to tell it to my buddy, because I see his Christmas tree up in September.
Oh God!
It's up all year round. I mean, they'll decorate it depending on the season. They'll put Halloween decorate, but they just don't take it down.
Well, that's a little bit unconventional, but I mean, if it leads to a better world, then
so be it.
I don't know. So be it. I thought we'd maybe wrap things up on a pleasant note and focus back on that other component of how the holidays impacts our well-being. and impacts our well-being in a hedonic sense, because the holidays, of course, are the time of the year in which we can pursue hedonia, or the pursuit of pleasure. And I think Christmas is a time where both children and adults can enjoy themselves equally in their enjoyment of games and of feasting. And I think Dickens puts it quite rightly when he says, it's good to be children sometimes. And he continues, and never better than at Christmas, when its mighty founder was the child himself. And I think that really resonates with me. And another image that resonates with me as well is of Bob Cratchit. And he's kind of the epitome of this eternal child of Christmas in that sense. Mm-hmm. And Dickens paints a picture of this childlike playfulness and joyfulness that I think is one of the hallmarks of Christmas festivities. And this is in his description of Cratchit going down a slide on Cornhill at the end of a lane with boys 20 times in honor of it being Christmas Eve, and then running home to Camden Town as hard as he could pelt to play a blind man's buff. So blind man's buff, I'm not entirely sure what that alludes to. Maybe we can Google that. But this scene of him sliding down a hill 20 times, I mean, that evokes memories for me of past Christmases. I have lots of fond childhood memories of sliding down my snow-covered hill behind my house on my sled, and going over this elaborate jump that me and my friends had constructed, and flying 10 feet in the air and then landing on the snow. And I think that the holidays are for times like that, just to enjoy yourself, to frolic in the snow, to be a kid again. And I still try to maintain those traditions. Most recently, this past holiday, I got the opportunity to go sliding down my back hill again, and I was, allowing my inner child to express himself again. I think pictures such as these of people sliding down hills and so on, they conjure up pleasant images of past Christmases for me, and I think probably for others as well. And I think in addition to the holidays being a time that inspires us to be better selves, it also inspires us to enjoy ourselves, and to fully enjoy our own being without apology, and in the company of good friends. And so I think in that sense, Christmas blends the best of both worlds. It's a time that allows us to cultivate our eudaimonic well-being, but it's also a time that allows us to cultivate our hedonic well-being. And I don't know if that resonates with you too, Ryan, the pleasurable side of Christmas.
Yeah, I mean, I just love all the food. I love getting together with my family. For the longest time, up until recently, my family's been kind of spread across Canada. And I'm sure that you can relate to how that feels. So just being able to get together with everyone and, exchange gifts, eat food that everyone makes. We have like a potluck. Everyone's kind of in charge of making one thing or the other. And we all just kind of like bring it in, and it's so good. All the chocolate, the little bit of booze here and there. Just seeing everyone and sort of reliving those old traditions, like it just gives me such like a sense of warmth. Like even thinking about it, it just makes me smile, makes me happy. But that just little digression here that blind man's buff. It's like an old form of tag where person who was it would be blindfolded, and they'd be going around trying to tag the people. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that sounds like maybe a new holiday tradition that I should introduce maybe to next Christmas. In addition to the tobogganing.
Fun. One of the staples at my house, anyways, is my uncle. He's from Germany, his family, and they have sort of like Glühwein, which is like a mulled wine beverage, nice and warm, and it's just like one of the staples in my house. It just everybody loves, even people who don't drink, they love having a drink of that at Christmas. So,
right. Yeah, no, I mean, I think something like a good libation can definitely elevate people's moods and get them into that hedonic state of being, I know in the case of one of the staples in our household, especially on Christmas morning, is we do the Prosecco. We have a toast after, while we open up our gifts, we have a toast and
nice.
And there's the Baileys and coffee and the rum and eggnog and good beer, of course, and wine and
everything you drink at Christmas has to have at least a splash of alcohol in it.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Even the pancake mix.
Yeah.
Well, in any case, we're nearing the end of our conversation here. I think we've gone into all of these issues in some depth, and hopefully we've clarified some of our own understandings of what the meaning of Christmas is. And so at this point, I'd like to just bring things to a summation. And I think that in summary, the philosophical meaning of Christmas, at least in my own view, is in many respects ethical in nature. And I think it's a time that presents opportunities to attain and maintain and improve one's well-being. That is in the eudaimonic and the hedonic sense. And I think that the Christmas Carol may be interpreted as an archetypal representation of how Christmas affects our well-being for the better. That is, it facilitates the attainment, maintenance, and improvement of our well-being. And I think that it's also a time to help others attain and maintain and improve their own well-being for the better through our benevolent actions. And I think a great novella like The Christmas Carol can inspire us to do that. And I think The Christmas Carol can be interpreted as an archetypal representation of how the spirit or the spirits of Christmas, whether they be supernatural or natural, whether they be, entities that are beyond our known understanding of the natural world, or whether they be merely aspects of our own consciousness, aspects of our own memory or imagination, regardless of what exactly they are in a metaphysical sense. It would seem that they inspire us to be benevolent to others and to thereby support their well-being. And just to wrap things up with a quote from a commentator of Dickens, Forster. I think he sums up the meaning of the Christmas Carol, and I think also the holidays and Christmas more generally, in the following way. He states, the Christmas Carol has been carried to countless firesides with new enjoyment of the season, better apprehension of its claims and obligations. It mingles grave with glad thoughts, much to the advantage of both. What seems almost too remote to meddle with is brought within the reach of the charities, and what was near it touched with tenderness. It comforted the generous rebuked the sordid, cured folly by kindly ridicule and comic humor, and saying to the readers, thus you have done, but it were better thus, may for some have realized the philosopher's famous experience, and by a single fortunate thought, revise the whole manner of life. So maybe Christmas is an opportunity where thought itself can help us change our lives so that the lives that we want to lead are realized in that way. So I think that sums things up fairly succinctly, and I think we can leave it at that for now. So for now, we'll sign off, and we shall continue our philosophical explorations at a later date.
Thanks, Graham.
Yeah, thanks.